Okay, so I didn't advertise a topic for today because I wasn't quite sure yesterday when I sent out the email what to talk about. But quickly I realized, but wait a second, I attended a conference downtown DC last Sunday, and I wanted to share my thoughts about that conference. This was the paper that they handed out, and this is the title of the conference: Shared Destiny, Separate Paths, a leadership forum on American Jewry in Israel. So this was sponsored by the Federation with their partnership with the Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. So some of you may know that over the years that I've talked about the Hartman Institute, which I've been very impressed with and been blessed to have been able to study there. It's a pluralistic think tank based in Jerusalem. They have a North American branch, which is just as important as the one in Jerusalem. It was founded by a Rabbi David Hartman, PhD, former pulpit rabbi in Montreal, made Aliyah with his family back in the 70s, and eventually had this dream of a think tank to bring pluralistic Jewish democratic ideas to the Israeli public. So Scholar Stream is through the Jewish Theological Seminary. Hartman Institute has other things that they have available to Jews around North America. If you Google Shalom Hartman Institute North America, you'll come up with their website and a variety of ways to be able to get emails from them. The president of Hartman Institute of North America, Yehuda Kurtzer, does a podcast, a weekly podcast on Jewish ideas today, something like that. Always very thought-provoking. There are professors that they work with who are affiliated with them, who go across the country to teach. I'm sure there are lectures that have been recorded that are on their website. Very, very important work that they're doing. So I was involved. They have a cohort for rabbis. They always do a summertime study for rabbis to come to Jerusalem to study. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to go too much. I thought I could go this summer, but I have two weddings to attend in smack dab in the middle of the Hartman rabbinic program. But I went to a 3-year program that they had, and whenever Hartman is promoting any kind of lecture, I always sign on for it. So Federations of North America have partnered with Hartman in order to provide some scholarly programming for the Federation community. Now, the Federation community, we might not be so familiar with it because there aren't too many people within our congregation who are active in leadership in the Federation. I think a lot of us donate to the Federation every year, but there aren't too many of us historically who have been part of the leadership of Federation. Just the way it is. I'm not saying that good or bad. I'm just saying that might impact what we know about the Federation. So Federation, Jewish Federation of Greater Washington, is our branch of the Jewish Federations of North America. They are the clearinghouse, really, for volunteer support agencies in the area, like the Jewish Council for the Aging or Jewish Social Service Agency, or also for raising money to support organizations in Israel. They are the clearinghouse for for these organizations locally and internationally. I think they partner with the Joint Distribution Committee as well to support disadvantaged Jewish communities around the world. So Federation is a really, really important agency that supports the needs of the Jewish community locally and globally. And so working with the Hartman Institute, the Hartman Institute helps focus or provide vision in an academic kind of way for what we should be thinking about, especially vis-a-vis our relationship with Israel. So there was a whole day last Sunday from 9 o'clock in the morning to 3:30 in the afternoon focused on this idea, shared destiny, separate paths. So in other words, are we working together as an American Jewish community and a State of Israel community, or are we working parallel paths or divergent paths? In other words, do we have the same vision of what it means to be Jewish, and are we providing the same resources for our two communities together? And that has been a question throughout the State of Israel's history since 1948. In fact, I would say it's a question since 1897, when Theodor Herzl convened the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland. What's the relation? What is the relationship of the outside land of Israel Jewish community to the land of Israel and the nascent, in 1897, the nascent Jewish community there? Okay, so we heard last Sunday from scholars. Just one second. We heard from scholars from Israel, from the Hartman Institute, who came in just for this program to talk about different aspects of that relationship between the American Jewish community and the Israeli Jewish community, and how, with these rallies, these protest rallies that are going on as the focal point, what are we protesting about the same thing? Do we even know what Israel's protesting about? And is what they're protesting about, their vision for what they see Israel to be, is that the same vision of what we see the State of Israel to be? Okay, so there's a lot to unpack with that. And so we're not going to have time to unpack everything about that. But let me, before I share with you a few things that these scholars were sharing, let me just talk about this. So I think for Jews in America of a particular generation, Jews were raised with, and of that particular generation, I'm talking about my age and older. So, and I don't mean to point on to point out Gabe, but Gabe is, let's say, 10, 15 years younger than I am. Okay, so he's a religious school parent, and so I'm not sure what I'm about to say vis-a-vis my Zionism would necessarily apply to Gabe or not. Okay, so so for Jews in America of my generation and older, I think, across the board, were raised with a very strong, strong connection to the land of Israel and the State of Israel. Okay, so I was raised in going to a Jewish day school all my life. My father's a rabbi, so that already puts me in one corner of the Jewish community already, more well-educated Jewishly than the average Jew, and more connected to the State of Israel maybe than the average Jew, because by the time I became bar mitzvah, I had already been to Israel 3 times. And two of those times were attempts at permanently moving to Israel and living in Israel with my family. So in 1968, when I was 6 years old, I spent a month in Israel with my parents and an aunt who came along for that trip. And 1969, we attempted Aliyah for the first time, and we were there for 4 months. 1972, we attempted Aliyah again, and we were there for a year from June to June. So June 72 to June 73. And so I had a very, very, very strong connection with Israel. But I imagine, first, the nature of the Jewish community was such that there's a large proportion of Jews in America belonging to synagogue up until the early 70s. So if Jews in America belonged to synagogue and their children became bar and bar mitzvah, strong connection to Israel. Okay, how many of them may have traveled to Israel? I don't know. There might be statistics around about that. From how many of Jews traveled to Israel in the 60s or in the 70s. I imagine after the 6-Day War, the number of Jews traveling to Israel was a lot more than before the 6-Day War. I think that's fair to say, but still a decent proportion of American Jewish community had traveled to Israel at least once in their life. So I think that the Jewish community had a very strong relationship. So Jews of my generation and older have a very strong relationship with the state of Israel. And what that meant was that we understood that we would support Israel no matter what, right? And especially after the 6-Day War, and even more so after the Yom Kippur War, when in the Yom Kippur War, Israel's survival was threatened. Israel bonds donations, other donations through Federation, United Jewish Appeal, whatever it was, to have money channeled to Israel, skyrocketed, right? Everybody gave monetarily, everybody supported Israel no matter what. Governments of Israel were always, until Menachem Begin, governments of Israel were always Labor Party and the coalitions that the Labor Party meant, which meant liberal, democratic, Jewish values were represented by the government of the state of Israel. So it's as if we're talking American Jews, strong democratic values, and I would say until the 70s, strong liberal democratic values, okay, as opposed to conservative Republican democratic values. Until the 70s, Jewish community, mostly liberal democratic leaning, supporting a government of Israel that supported those very same democratic values. So not only Jewishly are we connected to the land, but American-wise. So our civics, our American civics were aligned with the government of Israel as well. Now, so we jump ahead to 2023 and the rallies that are going in Israel. Now that relationship is fractured. There aren't the younger people, so I'd say people younger even than Gabe. Yeah, so I'd say Jews of college age and just after are questioning their relationship with the state of Israel, and they have been for the past few years. Supporting Israel, being Jewish on the college campus is really, depending which college campus you're on, is very dangerous or challenging. Let's say challenging, not say dangerous. Let's say it's challenging. Unless you're on a campus like the University of Maryland or University of Pennsylvania or just two that have very, very large and active Hillels and large Jewish populations. On a smaller campus, it's like UC Berkeley. There are lots of Jews there, but I'm just pointing them out because there's a lot of pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel activities happening on campus. Okay, so that leads to, as a factor in affecting the younger Jewish generation relationship with Israel. And then there's also the sense, since the 80s and certainly the 90s, and especially after the failure of the Oslo Accords, right? Which I won't hesitate to say it was all Yasser Arafat's fault that there was no peace agreement signed at Camp David between Clinton, Ehud Barak, and Yasser Arafat. Blame it all on Yasser Arafat, absolutely. But however we understand what happened then, and then the intifadas that happened after that, a disaster, a tragedy for Israel. So many people, so many innocent lives lost in this struggle, and but that struggle has led some younger Jews to question their support of the state of Israel, seeing the state of Israel as let's say this, as anti-Palestinian for sure. I think we can all agree with that, but some would disagree about the nature of Israel's treatment of the non-Jewish Israeli citizens, and certainly of the Palestinians in the Palestinian territories. So that is Israel-Palestinian conflict has influenced younger Jews to the point of questioning how strongly they're going to be supporting the state of Israel, because that part of the democratic values in terms of accepting everyone as part of the community has been questioned, because there's a question of how Israel treats its non-Israeli Jewish citizens and its non-Israeli neighbors. Okay, so this is not a conversation about Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That's a conversation for another time. I'm just saying it's a factor in our relationship to the state of Israel today. So that makes our relationship with Israel complicated. It's not as clear-cut, black and white, that as a Jew in America, I will support the state of Israel no matter what. The government of Israel today questions our relationship with Israel. What about the thinking that Israel does not have the right to exist? Where does that fit here? Okay, that's the extreme of what the BDS movement is all about, and that's the extreme of what the Palestinians are promoting, that Israel, the state of Israel, is an interloper in its neighborhood. They're a colonial power, and they have no right to exist. Okay, well, that's a whole other question for another time as well. I'm assuming that everybody attending this Zoom session today, and everybody who's going to be watching this, understands as a foundational principle that Israel has a right to exist. Okay, and I say that unequivocally. Absolutely, Israel has a right to exist. Okay, and I see myself as a center to left-leaning person about basic civic democratic values. Israel has a right to exist in the nation, in the global, on the world stage. Has as much a right to exist as any other nation state in the world today. However, there are 202, whatever the count is in the United Nations today. Israel's just as right and I would say that Israel has more of a historical right to exist than most other nations in the world, right? If we understand that the state of Israel is the coming to fruition of what we've been praying for 2,000 years since the temple was destroyed in Jerusalem, then absolutely we have the right to exist, okay, as a homeland for Jewish people. And even if you don't buy into that history, I'd say even after the Holocaust, we have the right to exist, because the Holocaust is the example of anti-Semitism to the extreme, and Jewish people need a homeland as a refuge from centuries of persecution and slaughter. Okay, So Israel has a right to exist. The ideas that BDS and other conspiracy theories out there that try to profess that Israel, because of Jews, European Jews mainly, coming to Israel from 1897 to 1948 when the state of Israel was established, and that the European Jews who were coming from a society that was built on the idea of nation states, bringing their Western European ideas into this land where there were indigenous people before, and I'm not going to call them Palestinian. I'm not going to be like Smotrich, who was the Israeli government minister, who said publicly that the Palestinian people do not exist as an idea, that historically inaccurate idea. I won't go there. I will say that there was no such thing as a Palestinian people until Yasser Arafat created the Palestinian Liberation Organization in the early 60s. Okay? There were people there. There were Arab people who were indigenous to the land of Israel, who happened to live in a land that had historically been called Palestine for 2,000 years. So, yes, in that way, they're Palestinians. But as an idea, as a formal Palestinian idea, yes, the Palestinian idea came to fruition in the 60s by Yasser Arafat and others. Okay, so I don't deny the right of the Palestinian people to have a homeland of their own. I don't deny that. I think there should be two states, one for Israelis, one for Palestinians. I do believe that, but we're going far afield. But I do want to get to what happened at the conference, but I needed to provide some context so I understand why the conference was happening. So the government of Israel now is threatening, some see the government as threatening basic democratic values by its attempt to enact extreme judicial reform and an overhaul of its system. I don't know enough about the details of it to provide you with enough background, but suffice it to say that it's about the relationship between the Supreme Court and the government, okay, and the Knesset, okay, Prime Minister, Knesset, Supreme Court. Those are the three branches of government in Israel. And there has always been a legal advisor to the Prime Minister to whenever the Prime Minister wanted to promote or put forth legislation, the legal advisor would consult the Prime Minister to say, yes, that seems to fit in with the constitutional framework. There is no constitution in Israel. Israel works with basic laws that have been accepted and enacted by the Knesset and accepted by the Supreme Court. So I'm just reading what Gabe just wrote to everyone in the chat. Right. Okay. So yeah, that's just one example of many examples we can give about what happens on campus, campuses across the country, vis-a-vis Israel. But thank you, Gabe, for sharing that in the chat. The legal advisor would always suggest to the Prime Minister, you know, you want to temper this law in this way to ensure that it passes muster, because the Supreme Court has the right to question any law passed by the Knesset. And so what the government of Israel is attempting to do now is to change that. They want to have the Knesset to have the final say over laws passed, because their vision of democracy is the government was voted in by the people, which isn't exactly true. Okay, the Likud got the most votes at 30 some odd seats of the 61 seats you need to have a majority. There's never been no one party in the history of the state of Israel has ever garnered 61 seats. At the most, Labor in its heyday in the 60s and 70s would have 40 to 50 seats, and that's in the heyday. Okay, so they were still 20 to 10 seats short. They still had to form a coalition. So today, Likud gets 30 some odd, and Lapid and Gantz had 30 some odd. So they weren't interested in forming a coalition together. It could have just been simply Likud and Lapid together. They could have had a majority. But Lapid always said, I'm not sitting with that criminal. Bibi Netanyahu, who's under indictment. I don't blame him for not wanting to do that. Bibi allegedly is a crook. Okay, so be that as it may, so Bibi Netanyahu decided, so people voted for Likud knowing who his potential coalition partners would be, which would be the far right political parties. Okay, so I think people knew that going into the election. So if they're voting for Bibi, they're most likely voting for that kind of coalition government. Okay, so I'm not sure Bibi can flat out say, when people voted for me, they're voting for this coalition government. It was unclear, really, if he was actually going to go through with that and form that coalition. But so they claim they have a mandate, and that's how their vision of democracy works. That whoever gets the most votes then has the mandate of the country to do what it wants to do. But that's not exactly how democracy is supposed to work. There are things within the system to kind of checks and balances within the system to allow the system to work in the way that it does. Right. So what Netanyahu is suggesting, I'm oversimplifying, is to get rid of the checks and balances, because that goes against their vision of what they think people were voting for. But checks and balances are there for no matter what kind of government should be there to ensure that some basic agreement is always held about how the government is to function, that basic human rights will be enacted no matter what, and supported no matter what kind of government would be in place, right? So if a government suggests to build settlements in areas of the Palestinian territory that have never been built before, the Supreme Court should be able to say, no, that is a threat to the security of the state of Israel and its population, and therefore the Supreme Court could stop such government action. So checks and balances need to be there in order to ensure that the government works right. So now, okay. So now to get to what some of the people who spoke at the conference last Sunday were talking about. Danielle Hartman, who's a rah-rah supporter of the relationship between the North American Jewish community and the state of Israel. His father, David Hartman, who founded the Hartman Institute, like I said, he was a pulpit rabbi in Montreal. So that's why I changed it to North American as opposed to American, because he was born in Montreal before he and his family made Aliyah. So he's saying now that he said last Sunday that the people who are rallying in the streets of Tel Aviv and all across Israel, right now, there are 100,000 people as we speak right now outside the Knesset, okay, rallying against the judicial overhaul and also now against Netanyahu firing the defense minister. The defense minister, Yoav Gallant, came out a couple of days ago saying that the judicial overhaul should stop and we should compromise and work together to come up with some kind of compromise. For that statement, he was fired. And that increased, like there's 600,000 people rallying Saturday night. Today, at the Knesset, outside the Knesset, 100,000 people are there rallying today? So Hartman thinks that the people who are rallying have won. I'm not so sure they have won. Netanyahu has postponed a speech that he was supposed to be giving about this. His coalition government is threatened, right? Because the far right people, Smotrich and Ben Gvir, are threatening to leave the government, leave the coalition, if Netanyahu halts the overhaul. And if they leave, then he has no government, and then elections would be called. So Netanyahu has a lot of work to do behind the scenes to keep his government together to stay in power. Okay, so Hartman thought last Sunday, he spoke to us, said that the people who are rallying have won. The question, though, is the people rallying, what are they rallying about? Are they just rallying against Netanyahu, or are they rallying about particular values? And what are those values that they're rallying for? And this is what other people were who spoke about to kind of highlight what we're dealing with here. So point number one I want to share is that the average Israeli cares nothing about the American Jewish community. And in fact, the majority of Israelis today, this is a stunning fact, but I kind of knew this from all the times I've been in Israel over the years. The majority of Israelis today think that the American Jewish community, us, the majority of Israelis today think that the American Jewish community will disappear in 20 years. Okay? And because of assimilation, they have a distorted view of what Jewish life is like in America, and that with assimilation, intermarriage, that lack of connection to Israel, that the American Jewish community is doomed to die. So why bother, the majority of Israeli Jews say, why bother dealing with the American Jewish community at all? Okay, so there is that sentiment. So I spent a year of college, my junior year of college in Israel. I spent a year of rabbinical school in Israel, my second year of rabbinical school. That's whenever we met with Israelis, official programs through the Hebrew University or through my rabbinical school, whenever we met with Israelis, that's what they said. We'll talk to you now because you're here now, but you're just here temporarily. But we really won't talk to you unless you move here, because then it's only then that we know that you're invested in us. Okay. The other thing about this is that the state of Israel coming into being as a historical event was done by Israelis. How much was the non-land of Israel community at the time for the first 4 decades of the 20th century? How much really was the American Jewish community involved in the establishment of the state of Israel? So it's seen, some scholars were suggesting, as an Israeli enterprise, as opposed to a whole commitment from the global Jewish community to ensure that the state of Israel would become established. Okay, there were Jews, noted Jews, who were in America who were anti-Zionist and saying all along, we do not support the Zionist Congress and the Zionist enterprise and the establishment of the state of Israel. There were noted American Jews who were anti-Zionist, just as there were noted American Jews who were very much pro-Zionist. Okay, so there's that nature of the relationship, that perhaps our relationship will never go anywhere, because Israelis really have no interest in talking to us. And, has Netanyahu at all come to this country in the past 10 weeks to talk to the American Jewish community, to rally support for what he wants to do? No. The only person to come to America from the government has been Smotrich. And when he came for an Israel Bonds event, because Israel Bonds is under the Ministry of Finance, which he heads, and he had to come to talk to the Israel Bonds leadership here in Washington. There were rallies outside the hotel, the very same hotel that my conference was at last Sunday. So there's that element, that fracture, that the Israeli Jewish community and the American Jewish community do not really talk to one another. And that's something that we need to overcome. The other element that they brought up is also, with all this overhaul being talked about, with judicial overhaul and the people rallying, how much of the second-class citizens in Israeli society are really participating in these rallies? Are they just white Ashkenazi Jews who are participating in the rallies, or are Israeli Arabs participating? How much are Palestinian issues part of the rallying points here to ensure that the rights of minorities in Israel are represented in this government and any future government? So that there's that element as well, that people are questioning these liberal values, how much of these liberal values are represented by the people who are rallying. So there aren't that many Israeli Arabs who are attending these rallies, and there were. The interesting thing is that when you take a look at pictures of these rallies, lots and lots and lots of people are waving Israeli flags or wearing Israeli flags. And the reason for that, which is fascinating, that these speakers pointed out, is that Israeli media, when they took pictures at the very first rally on their first Saturday night after Netanyahu's government was formed, it showed pictures of people waving Palestinian flags. So the point for the media was, look at this rally. These are pro-Palestinian people. We don't have to worry about them. They're like fringe of Israeli society. So in reaction to that, the organizers of the rally, because it was just a small group of people waving the Palestinian flags, everybody else was not. The organizers ensured that from then on, that people would be waving Israeli flags and wearing Israeli flags, to show that this is an Israeli movement. It's not a fringe Palestinian movement, this rally against the government. So the idea here is, I just wanted to have this kind of freewheeling, free association kind of talk about this, because clearly it's on my mind. I look to the Times of Israel several times a day to see what's going on in Israel. I care about Israel, and I also care about the fact that, first, I don't believe that the American Jewish community is going to die in 20 years. I've been doing my best to ensure the education and well-being of our small niche in the American Jewish landscape here in Olney with Sharei Tefillah. And I firmly believe that part of a definition of what it means to be an American Jew is to have a very strong connection with the land and state of Israel. All right, any thoughts or comments about any of this? So, yeah. So, I can only hope, the other aspect of being an American Jew is that I'm not a citizen of the state of Israel. So I care about what's going on there, but ultimately I haven't served in the army of Israel, and I'm not a citizen of Israel. I actually still have my Israel identification number. When we made Aliyah in 1970, I think it's from the 72 time, you get a Teudah Zehut, an identity certificate, identity papers. So I still have an identity number. So I'm in the computer system of Israel for that. I haven't paid taxes, so I have no more right to have any say about the Israeli government than any of you do. But we do have a right to comment about it because we care. And I think Israel, the Israeli community needs to know that that American Jewish community cares about it and is invested in it, and that our opinion, as being the largest Jewish community anywhere in the world, should have some kind of influence on the second largest Jewish community anywhere in the world, and that is the state of Israel. So if nobody has any questions or comments about that, then we'll call it a day. And thank you as always for listening. And next Monday, I'm not sure, just with Passover prep and everything like that. And then the following Monday is during Passover. I think we'll take a 2-week break and resume our Jews and the News on the Monday after Passover. So that would be the 17th, April 17th. That night will be Yom HaShoah. So we'll see what we talk about on Monday, April 17th. So have a good rest of the day, everybody. And if I don't see you before, Chag Sameach. Have a happy and healthy Passover.